on, freaks and friends? The year, 1997. New York City is a walled, maximum security prison. Breaking out is impossible. Breaking in is insane. In the early 1980s, John Carpenter was perhaps at the peak of his creative power. At this point, he's turning out absolute banger after cult classic, just left, right, and center, one after another. And this one is no different. Right now, we are looking at the 7th entry of the giant John Carpenter review series. Join me as we enter and escape from New York. Escape from New York came out in 1981, just 1 year after The Fog, and this film stars Kurt Russell, Lee Van Cleef, Ernest Borgnine, Donald Pleasence, Isaac Hayes, Harry Dean Stanton, and Adrienne Barbeau. When the president's plane goes down in the super maximum security prison that is the island of Manhattan, the prison administrator, played by Lee Van Cleef, has no choice but to send in the one, the only, we thought you were dead Snake Plissken, who is played by Kurt Russell. And he sends him in there on what is essentially a suicide rescue mission because the fate of the world may lie on the success of Snake Plissken. So there really is a lot to be enjoyed here in Escape from New York, this being sort of one of those early 80s dystopian thrillers with that action sensibility. This is what we see the not too distant future looking like. It's always fun to revisit those, especially after we've elapsed the year that not too distant future takes place in. It's funny to think too that 1997 is closer to the year this movie came out, 1981, than the year we are currently in right now. It's a little scary to think about, honestly. One thing I thought was pretty cool right off the bat in this film is the little opening raft sequence where you see a couple guys trying to escape from the prison through the water, of course. They're on a raft, it's the middle of the night, and the helicopter comes in and says, "Hey, you guys get your asses back to the island or we'll shoot you down." And that kind of reminded me of Assault on Precinct 13 with the way that one opens, where you got the thugs running through the alley and then they just get freaking shot from the top of the buildings there. I don't know if that was an intentional nod to Assault on Precinct 13 or not, but I thought that was a interesting little bit. It was relatively reminiscent of that. Of course, being that was another Carpenter film, that was an interesting nod there. Another thing I gotta say too about this film is it might be one of John Carpenter's best exercises in tension. We get that really through the whole idea of the suicide mission, more or less, where when they send Snake Plissken in there to retrieve the president and all the stuff that the president has, the tape and everything, tape that has the survival of the human race essentially on it, they inject him with these little microbes or whatever, these little bombs that are basically going to go off after the capsules around him dissolve, that are going to shoot just little holes in his jugular veins there, the artery. It's going to blow the artery out, whatever. That's basically got a 24-hour timer on it, but by the time he's being sent into the city to go and retrieve the president, he doesn't have a 24-hour time limit. He's looking at 22 hours. And I think there's just something about having 22 hours as opposed to the 24 hours that we would normally get in this kind of film. With the I don't know, I just feel like 22 hours as opposed to 24 is kind of a jarring idea. It just kind of adds to that stress level. Probably something about it being not a whole day, you know. But, you know, the president's got to get to the peace summit, so you got to hurry up, get in there and get him the fuck out of there, right? Another thing, too, I noticed that felt like a callback to a previous John Carpenter film that I got to point out real fast was around the walls of Manhattan, they have various stations posted up. One of them is Station 19, the other Station 21. Those are the only two that we really get significant visual attention brought to. And I'm feeling like that might be a bit of a nod to Dark Star, where 19 and 21 were the bombs that had significant impact to the plot in the third act of that film. So I thought that was kind of cool. Again, whether or not that was intentional, you can't ignore the possibility that John Carpenter is winking to the start of his career there. About Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken, holy shit, man. First of all, Snake Plissken might be, without a doubt, the coolest character that John Carpenter has ever created. Of course, we all love Myers, we all love Loomis, but Snake Plissken, dude, is just too freaking cool. And I'd have to say that the Metal Gear Solid video games probably owe a huge debt to John Carpenter, because I feel their character Snake, that dude's clearly modeled after Snake Plissken. I haven't played the games, but the dude has an eye patch. He's a badass who goes in on these solo missions. That dude's fucking based off Snake Plissken. I don't care what anybody says on that. And there's a scene when he's initially going to get the president. He gets shot in the knee with a fucking arrow. And because there's all these guys who were... They basically work for Isaac Hayes, who is the main antagonist in this film. You got all these thugs outside, and you know, if he screams, he's going to alert them, but he silently takes that arrow to the knee, kills the guy who shoots him with it, and that was probably the most badass thing, like one of the most badass things that Kurt Russell does in this movie. Just takes that arrow and just barely even lets out a grunt, just gonna take it, keep on moving. Too freaking cool. Another thing I saw in here that I thought was real interesting, and this goes into that whole video game tie-in, whatever. The bums that are below the pub in New York City, where they're singing that real fun "You're in New York" song. That whole sequence was a lot of fun, by the way. But the bums that are underneath that little venue there, They kind of remind me of the NPCs that you would see in one of those games like Skyrim, where he's walking through looking for the president because the little radar detector is like, oh, he's close by. And he's going through the little subterranean level there. One of the bums just, that he walks by, just kind of turns around. Oh, hi, Chief. Nice night. Nice boots. And it just reminded me totally of something you would see on a game like Skyrim. Like, I've never played it, but I've watched people play it. And that's kind of how the NPCs operate in that game. I thought that was a funny little thing. It's like, well, John Carpenter had no way of knowing. And continuing on with Snake, though, I love Snake's dynamic with Hawk, the prison administrator played by Lee Van Cleef. There's sort of this hostile professionalism. Of course, before he goes into the city, he says something to him. When I get out of here, when I get back, I'm gonna kill you. Again, just kind of shows how badass Snake is. And everybody that he comes across to, they all say to him, oh, you're Snake Plissken. I heard you were dead. He's just got one of those really badass reputations, but everyone thinks he's dead. So that I thought was kind of interesting. And I like, too, that this was before everything needs to be spoon-fed to us, so they don't really elaborate too much on who Snake Plissken was before this. They do let us know in the first act that he was a badass soldier turned bank robber, and that's why he was a candidate to go, to prison himself there. But for him to be... He just happened to be arrested at the right time, because he probably would not have been given this opportunity had he been caught like 10 days before this. But, when he is going through that subterranean area, though, since we're talking about that, I might as well continue on with that. He comes across the president's radar, but it's not on the president. It's on George Buckflower, who's in his sort of wheelhouse of acting at this point. He's playing a little drunken bum. who's just there, and this guy's freaking out of his mind. He's like, I'm the president. Starts singing Hail to the Chief and all that shit. Just a fun little Buckflower cameo there. And, runs into Ernest Borgnine, who's like, hey, you're dealing with the crazies. You shouldn't be in this side of town, Snake. And dude's driving his freaking cab around New York City, the Manhattan prison. It's just a lot of fun. Got a lot of love for Ernest Borgnine's character in this. Cabby is a lot of fun. He's so super excited to be involved with the whole sense of adventure. And, he just seems like a good guy. Of course, he does run away like a chicken shit at one point, but he comes back and, tries to redeem himself, says, hey, come on, guys, like near the climax. But, yeah, Ernest Borgnine as Cabby is a lot of fun in this film. One thing I do also think is really cool, of course, is Isaac Hayes as the Duke, who's essentially the ringleader of all the different gangs that are operating within the New York City prison at this point. And I don't know, Isaac Hayes brings something interesting to this role. I don't know if it's Isaac Hayes himself or if it's just something he brought to the character, but he has a little twitch on the eye. It's like a little nervous tick or something. It's one of those little interesting touches that he has on the character that I thought was pretty... it's like his little Bond villain quirk, if you will, And his chandelier-laden Cadillac was the coolest thing. Like, freaking chandeliers on the headlights, giant disco ball under the mirror, like... This is fucking insane. Hydraulics on the rear end, fucking massively, the suspension off the ground. It's just a freaking... It's nuts, man. I absolutely adore the Duke's whip in this. There's this part where the bad guys, though, they capture Snake, of course, because, adds to the whole tension and suspense. They put him in a ring with this massive freaking fighter, who's apparently been killing people left, right, and center, because you see when they're taking Snake out to the ring, they're bringing a guy in on a gurney, and it seems as if there's no way that Snake is going to win this fight. But, of course, they're fighting with clubs, and then they're given spiked bats. Any fight scene with a spiked bat, I'm immediately a fan of that. I just love the whole idea of spiked bats. I don't know what it is. It's just one of the meanest looking weapons. So that fight goes on with Kurt Russell, who's like a normal sized guy, probably 5'10", 6 foot. Fights this massive freaking behemoth dude who's probably easily 6'10", 7 foot tall. I'm not sure the size of that guy off the top of my head. Maybe there'll be a note about that here somewhere. But he eventually gets the better of him, gets his equipment back. There's a little timer on his wrist that lets him know when the little capsules are gonna dissolve and blow his neck out. Of course, he has the little beacon thing that he sees another guy wearing. And yeah, that leads us right into the climax, which, starts atop the World Trade Center, where Harry Dean Stanton's character and Adrienne Barbeau's character, Brain and... Damn it, what was her name? Maggie. Brain and Maggie are looking to escape with the little mini plane that Snake brought in, because they have the president with them at this point, because they infiltrate the Duke's lair. That was a whole thing I should have mentioned. I'll probably come back to. But the climax leads from atop the World Trade Center once the little plane tumbles off in a really a so bad it's good kind of effect. We see the plane coming down to the ground. It's a fun little effect there. Those early 80s effects, man, there's just something about that. Leads to a chase along the 69th Street Bridge, and, they're in the cab, Ernest Borgnine's back, Snake's driving, and the bridges are just loaded with landmines. So Harry Dean Stanton's like, he's already double-crossed Snake a few times in his life at this point, and he's like, hey, I know where all the mines are, you might want to take me with you. So reluctantly, Snake's like, alright, come on, you fucking turncoat. And, of course, they hit a mine because Isaac Hayes is chasing them in his badass chandelier-laden whip. they hit a mine. Cabby dies, unfortunately. Harry Dean as Brain dies. And freaking at this point, Adrienne Barbeau's character becomes a real fucking badass. She wants Duke's head on a fucking platter. She tries shooting at his car as he's just freaking hauling down. Of course, he ends up taking her out. And yeah, that was a pretty brutal shot. Adrienne just kind of laying there, freaking just fucking bleeding really fucking bad. But, you know, they eventually get to the wall where the prison guards are, alright, Snake's coming, he's got the president, let's freaking get this. Of course, they get the president over the wall, and the Duke shoots down the guards at the top of the wall. Snake's freaking fighting with the Duke, knocks him down. He starts to take the rope up the wall, and the president just stops the little gear thing, the pulley system that the rope is on. And after having been taunted earlier in the film by the Duke, you know, shot at by him, and just essentially made the Duke's bitch at this point for entertainment, like a court jester, you know. The president's like, alright, now's my opportunity. Just shoots the fuck out of the Duke, and he's taunting him back with what he taught him. You know, I'm A1, I'm the Duke of New York. And he's just mocking him with that. That's a lot of fun there. Donald Pleasence freaking kills it in that moment. And afterwards he proceeds to thank Snake in like the most half-assed way ever. You know, he's like, oh, I want to thank you for getting me out of there. And, you know, Snake mentions, you know, a lot of people died getting you. Oh, yes. Yeah. I thank them too. Just real half-assed way. It's like, just the way his character dynamic changes from when he's in danger to when it's like, okay, business as usual, I got a TV engagement. Like, you just see that little change in his character, and I think Donald Pleasence pulled that off tremendously. But it really makes you almost not like the president in this film. And another funny little thing, too, that we see is about the little tape that has it's this whole little speech about the dangers of nuclear fusion or something like that. Snake has that tape, but he also pulled out Cabby's little the tape that Cabby had in his car, and that's the one he ends up giving to Houck and the president. So when the president goes on TV to play the tape for the summit, goes to put the tape in, but it's Cabby's old ragtime music. And you see, it cuts to Snake walking away, just gutting the freaking tape that had all the nuclear secrets and shit on it. It's like, it's job security right there, my dude. So I was in the middle of editing, and it occurred to me that this would be a suitable time to play the name game that we pulled off in the fog, where I threw down the name of the frequent collaborating cast members who appear throughout the John Carpenter films. Because this one I think might have the largest set of regular actors who appear throughout his filmography. And here we've got Kurt Russell making his second appearance. Adrienne Barbeau makes her second appearance. Donald Pleasence, second appearance. Harry Dean Stanton makes his first appearance. We'll see him again later. This is the sixth and final time we will be seeing Charles Cyphers in a John Carpenter directed film. Also making their final appearances in the John Carpenter universe, we have Tom Atkins' second and final run. Susan Hubley makes a special appearance here. She was last seen as Priscilla Presley in the Elvis TV movie. She was the girl in the coffee shop here. Frank Doubleday here in his second and final appearance. We previously saw him in Assault on Precinct. Nancy Stevens, we saw her in Halloween. We all know as Marion Chambers here in her second and final role. Jamie Lee Curtis makes her third and final appearance. She appears here with a voice cameo. She was the narrator voice at the beginning, talking about how the city of Manhattan is now a prison. And I believe she's also the voice inside the prison, talking about if you don't want to serve your prison sentence, we can euthanize you now. Talk to your guard. Also, third and final, we have Nick Castle, who was also a co-writer here. If you're wondering, where the fuck is Nick Castle in this movie? He's the gentleman playing the piano with his back to the camera during the little scene in the venue there. And I should have mentioned this one earlier. I did mention him earlier in the review. But making his second of quite a few more appearances to come, we have George Buckflower. Here he is playing in his wheelhouse of the characters that he's known for, playing the drunken bum. So he's kind of doing a 2-for-1 special there. You could say get 2 for a buck. So to real quick take a look at some of the behind the scenes technical aspects that help this film out. We're going to start with Dean Cundy'S cinematography, which again is absolutely on point in this film. One thing Cundy's work in this one does is it goes to show that you can have a badass early 80s action film without having the absolute berserker cam, which is something that I think we're really just more acquainted with these days. But of course the action films are just cut from a completely different cloth now than they were then. But it's one of those things worth pointing out, because a lot of the shots, just like in a lot of the other Carpenter films Cundy had worked on, they take their time. A lot of the shots take their time, and then you get the shots as we get closer to the end of the film where they get a little tighter and a little wilder. But the absolute perfection in the cinematography on this film is just one of those things that can't go understated. The score by John Carpenter and Alan Howarth in this film is, again, it's a great score. It's a Carpenter score. I had actually had the main title as my ringtone for my text messages for a while, and I actually had to change that because it was the 14-second version, or maybe longer than that. It's like between 14 seconds and 30 seconds, I think. But every time I would get a freaking message, it would be the little dun 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 dun, you know, the main theme here. And I was like, I can't do this. I like this tune a little too much to have to hear it every time somebody wants to get a hold of me. So I ended up cutting that there. But that little anecdote aside, you know, the score in this one's just great. It's got that nice... you can tell it's a Carpenter score when you hear it. Like, if you just heard this by itself, but you had seen a couple other Carpenter films, you would get that feeling. This sounds like it should be on a John Carpenter movie. Because I think that was my first interaction with this score, honestly. It was like, I heard it somewhere and I can't remember where it was, but I couldn't help but think, this sounds like it could be in one of those John Carpenter films. And it's got a different feel than, of course, Halloween in the Fog. This one is, of course, a whole different type of movie than those two films are. And, you know, it just fits, but it still has that same signature mark on it. So the score is definitely a winner here. The set design by Joe Alves. I don't know if is it Alves or Alves. Somebody help me out on that. It's pretty gritty without feeling like it's forceful grittiness. That kind of gives it almost that sort of 70s feel, that just really grimy without being too overly grimy, if that makes sense. It does give you that feeling that you are in a really dilapidated version of New York City. At the end of the day, guys, Escape from New York is another one of the staples of John Carpenter's career. It came out at the sort of the peak of his creative output, as I said at the beginning of this. He's churning films out left, right, and center, and they are still all of a relatively high quality. This one is no different in that regard. It's, again, got some of the best tension you'll find in a John Carpenter film. It's got action set pieces that might not be the most exciting by today's standards, but it's still a very good looking film. It keeps you entertained, as most of these are going to do. It's a film that you really should check out, especially if you like the dystopian thrillers, if you like those sci-fi action films. Like, this is totally going to be something that you're going to want to reach for. Escape from New York it's a must-watch, I'd say. And it's not necessarily my favorite John Carpenter film, but it's definitely one of his better non-horror films that he had done. So at the end of the day, Escape from New York gets from me 4 dystopian prison states out of 5. And of course, as always, I do want to thank you guys for tuning in and watching this. Be sure to tune in next time as we take a look at John Carpenter's The Thing, which is considered by many to be his best film, considered by many others to be probably the best horror film. Where do I stand on that? You're going to have to come in next time and find out. But again, thank you guys. Give this video a thumbs up if you want. Subscribe if you'd like, that'd be cool too. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one.